So what we can hope for is news by around 4:35. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, because the orbiter is going to go around and come back, and it's going to try to communicate.
When the orbiter passes over the landing zone again.
Okay. Let's welcome Neil Tyson, who's joining us. Somebody who, of course, is an expert at communicating, spoke with us earlier so eloquently, and we had, I think, such a constructive debate. Well, we've lost contact, Mr. Tyson, with the lander in the last 2 kilometers, so we don't quite know what's happened. Obviously, the Prime Minister who was there said, look, keep your heads up, ups and downs happen. How do you see events?
Well, if in case something bad happened, which of course we hope is not the case, one of the mantras of space exploration is if something goes wrong, it becomes an opportunity for it's an experiment rich in learning opportunities. How you might think about what could have gone wrong, so that it doesn't happen that way the next time you go. So people need to remember that when you are doing something that has never been done before, there's always risk. It's a fundamental part of the moving of the frontier of exploration.
Well, let me ask you, because there is obviously cause for concern because we're not hearing back from the lander. Now, there is an orbiter that completes an orbit every 2 hours. So do you think there's a possibility of assessing what could have happened?
I don't know what kind of reconnaissance cameras or other detectors are available on that orbiter. You have experts there who would surely know that. If it is possible that they have enough high resolution in their imaging to understand what may have happened at the site where you anticipated it to have landed, that would be highly useful.
Let me ask you, have there been instances in the past where a lander has begun once again, started communicating? Have there been instances such as these?
Yeah, like one of your other guests noted, often a well-designed system will have redundancies built into it, so that if this doesn't work or this communication channel doesn't work, there's a mechanism by which it can try to communicate by another way, through another transmitter, through another receiver, and so it depends on whether this stage of the mission was considered to be something that was high risk. And where there's high risk, that's generally where you would put in your redundancies.
Okay, well, we've heard from the ISRO chairman, and he said that, look, right up till the 2-kilometer mark, everything was okay. We were communicating fine. So obviously they've crossed a lot of stages very successfully. What are your big takeaways from a mission such as this?
Yeah, I mean, it's at the moon. You have an orbiter around the moon right now, and this is a good thing. This is an achievement. This is the moon is now in India's backyard. I think that's how you're allowed to think of it that way, because you have something of Indian manufacture that is there, hardware that is there visiting Earth's nearest neighbor. So all the entire everything up to then is a triumph, and we're still waiting for that communication point. And like I said, if not, you got to the moon within 2 kilometers. That's good. That's that's. And I like the be courageous messaging there. So yeah.
That's the Prime Minister. He says India is proud of our scientists. They've given their best and have always made India proud. These are moments to be courageous, and courageous we will be. Chairman ISRO gave updates on Chandrayaan 2. We remain hopeful and will continue working hard on our space program. I think that's the big takeaway. That's the spirit, as someone just said around me. That's the spirit we must exude, isn't it? I mean, there will be setbacks.
Yes. And allow me to say that some of the smartest scientists that ever were part of my community of astrophysicists have been Indian born. A leader among them was Chandrasekhar, one of our most productive space telescopes is named after him. And it's an X-ray based telescope. And so I'd always known India to be a source of brilliant scientists, brilliant engineers. There's a statistic, there's a thermodynamic property exhibited in matter that there's an Indian physicist, Bose and Einstein got together to understand this. So I've known the role of Indian brilliance like my entire life, contributing to physics and astrophysics. And then when I learned that, oh, wait a minute, I'm now decades ago, wait, you're not yet in space? How come? You have all this brilliance. And so I'm glad to see this moment arrive where space is now something that becomes a fundamental part of the dreamscape of the Indian subcontinent.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because just a few years back, and viewers might remember this, we saw one of ISRO's top rockets actually exploding into several fragments, shards, if you please, over the horizon. And many people thought this was the end. This was the setback. But look where we've come to. We've launched a record number of satellites in one go, 104, if I'm not mistaken, a few years back. We've turned it around, and we've got as close to the moon as within kissing distance. And I think we have every reason to be proud. I just wanted to ask you a couple of things, because it's always interesting, you know, from a philosophical perspective. Obviously, a lot of energy goes into a mission such as this. How do you think the scientist community is perhaps going to react to this within ISRO? Sorry.
Yeah, so if you have nothing more of this mission past this moment, then you're allowed to, I think, to declare it a success up to that point. What's important here is understanding what could have gone wrong if something went wrong, so that this becomes part of your library of lessons that get infused into the next round of missions. And when you referenced the Israeli spacecraft that exploded on the horizon, there is no history of failure of exploration telling other people, I guess we're not going to explore anymore. No, that has never happened. That has never happened. The year we lost more people than ever before climbing Mount Everest, the next year had more applicants to climb than any year before that. The challenge is something I think is deeply within, it's in our DNA to want to explore. Not everyone has the opportunity to do so. Not everyone has enlightened leadership that can take you there. Not everyone has the circumstances and the education levels to empower it. But when you do, there is no substitute.
You know what I really liked about the Prime Minister's statement when he was talking to the scientists? He said, I'm with you. Now, the Ministry of Space is under his watch. So obviously he's going to, the subtle message there is, we're not giving up. We're going to invest more. We're going to ensure you have the resources, and we're going to plug them in the right places. Now, how does an agency recover? Now, we've seen in the US there have been calamitous crashes, lives lost, etc. How do agencies recover?
So, particularly if it's a circumstance where lives are lost, then a commission gets set up, and you want to understand why, because you never want to have that happen again. By the way, like I said, when you're on the frontier, there was a professor of mine in graduate school. His name is Martin Schwarzschild. I first heard him say this to me. He said, the day you stop making mistakes is the day you know you are no longer on the frontier. Because the frontier does not come with an instruction manual. The frontier doesn't come with answers listed in the back of the book. You are stepping where others hadn't stepped before. And so it becomes a part of an understanding of what it is to occupy that place. And I like what your Prime Minister said, because what he's saying is not, oh, you're not in this alone. We're in this with you. And I presume he's also speaking of all of the Indian people. Because when you do something that momentous and that significant on the landscape, it's not just the few people who design the spaceship. It's everybody is a participant, even if only vicariously. And that's a beautiful thing.
Well, we got a question from one of our panelists, Dr. Jha, who's an astrophysicist for you. He's a former joint director of the DRDO, which is the research development organization here in this country. Yes, Dr. Cha. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have just one small not suggestion. It's a comment. I think Neil can respond to it. See, the communication has been lost at 2.1 kilometer. At 2.1 kilometer, you don't have surface, you don't have rock, you don't have any of the blast things coming and hitting the communication system. So, I'm very hopeful that it is only something gone wrong with the communication, because at 2.1 kilometer, there was no rock, there was no ridges, there was no crests, there was nothing on that. So there is only one reason why communication can go. That is, the communication, there is a break between the communication and the subsequent stage, what happens in the communication system. However, the artificial intelligence of the craft is still working. It is still controlling the booster engines. So I'm still very, very hopeful that tomorrow morning you wake up and then you receive a message that the communication has been established and
yes,
the craft is at its place.
It's never over.
I hope Neil responds it.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Mr. Tyson.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Sir, you make a very important point. The craft was not descending through atmosphere where there would be heat shields and fragments of things breaking off. It didn't fail on contact where it's actually physically colliding with the moon's surface. If it lost contact in midair, in the vacuum above the moon, it's surely the simplest of issues. And I fully agree with you that probably the number one cause is communication. And with the AI built into it, what you're saying is, sir, that the craft doesn't need us. It's got its mission and it's going to move on and go ahead and do what it needs to do, which is a very hopeful sign.
It is very interesting because we were seeing the telemetric data as it was coming in. And if we just want to go into a little bit of pop analysis, it is interesting because the hard braking was absolutely okay. The fine braking went off fantastically, and just about 2 kilometers before we lost contact. Now, this thing has happened in the past, and I can tell you that with the Hubble Space Telescope, it was catastrophic. It was almost a write-off, wasn't it, Mr. Tyson?
Yeah, the Hubble telescope error, of course, that wasn't a communication error. It was a design flaw. Yeah. We're talking about now 30 years ago, where we learned that the mirror shape, it was a perfect shape to be a telescope. It was just the wrong shape for the needs of that instrument. And all of the images were fuzzy when they were supposed to be perfectly sharp. And so we all had to go back and say, well, we can't deorbit it. We're not going to rebuild it. And we got very clever people sitting in the same room at the same time saying, what are we going to do about it? And so what they did was design a pair of corrective eyeglasses for it, right? Some lenses that they put in the path of the focusing light to restore the proper optics to get the images that we needed. But that required yet another mission to the telescope, a repair mission, astronauts. So, like I said, sometimes the greatest among us rise up when you have challenges such as this. That's why in the movie Apollo 13, where one of our missions, there was a failure en route to the moon, and that failure brought out the best in everyone, in the astronauts, in the engineers, because they said, how are we going to solve this problem so that we don't lose the astronauts? So I think this is where, as we say, the rubber hits the road. This is where we say, what are we going to do about this? And are we strong, and do we have the resolve to come back if in case we never have contact with this instrument again?
Absolutely. I think those are very wise words. And those are words of an individual who's probably studied several of these incidences. But Mr. Tyson, look, at the end of the day, we're talking about science here, and science has progressed even in this particular mission. Let's not kid ourselves about that. Viewers, you're watching, it's very late at night here in India. We're still taking massive leaps. Now, Mr. Tyson, when you get so close to the moon, without an implosion, which is very visible, it suggests that you have actually transcended certain challenges already, isn't it?
Yes, because, for example, there's leaving the Earth for the first time for another destination. India has made great inroads into satellites around Earth. One of the most important ones, from my point of view, was you monitor your monsoon season as never before. Something so important to the yearly cycling of life and death in India. Without the monsoon, India would be a desert, and you know this. And so you want to understand that. You've got satellites, and they're your own satellites to monitor that. The moon was a next step. To get there, you had to leave Earth in such a way that the craft does not fall back to Earth. So these require very high boosters. You have to achieve the escape velocity of the Earth, which is, we still do miles here, 7 miles per second. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
we both have British history there telling us that.
Yeah.
But my point is, once you get that close to the moon, you belong to the moon. Okay, whatever happened to that craft, it is on the moon right now. You can guarantee it. So India's on the moon, even if you can't have a conversation with your spacecraft.
Absolutely, and I think that's the biggest takeaway. We managed to land. We've got, four of the important critical aspects in this entire procedure sorted, and anyone looking back on this mission will take heart from that. It's just the last, and we don't even still know, actually, Neil Tyson, we still don't know if it's only a communication mess up there. But
I want to add one quick thing. By the way, whatever happened here, it would not be as bad as what happened when we had a Mars mission that missed Mars completely because there was a mix-up in the units of measure for the thrust. Some were using metric and others were using the English system, and they did not know that at the time. And there it was, on Mars, and it missed Mars. That was one of the most embarrassing mistakes. You don't want to make that kind of a mistake. All right,
No,
that's
you
not
don't.
the kind of mistake you make on the frontier. That's one made back in the lab. And so, we've got some embarrassing moments in our past. But you keep moving. You just keep going. And that's the spirit of discovery. That's the spirit of life.
absolutely, we wouldn't have got to this point if we'd stopped at the first failure. So mankind or humankind has taught us to take failure in one stride and move beyond. Now, what do we move beyond to? Because there is also an orbiter which is going to go around the moon for about a year. Now, it's got, from what I'm being told, very sharp remote sensing as well as optical cameras, etc. So that can still do a lot, can't it?
So something I can tell you, from what I saw from your videos, that orbiter is a polar orbit.
Yes.
All right, that has special advantages relative to anything that's orbiting around the equatorial regions of an object, because if you orbit pole to pole, the moon then rotates about once per month. So that's where we get the the moon's time it takes to go around the Earth and the time it takes to rotate on its axis are the same.
Yes.
That's why the moon always shows the same face to Earth. But that's just a fact. When the orbiter that goes pole to pole, it means the moon will rotate inside of its orbit, so that every next pass on the moon, it sees a fresh slice to photograph. And if this keeps up, and it does it for months on end, you can get detailed images of the entire surface of the moon, something you would not be able to do with any other orbit. An equatorial orbit never sees the poles, but the poles will see the equator. So you're in a position to obtain enormously valuable data from the imaging you can obtain from your orbiter.
So you're saying that science can still be advanced?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you get the kind of data that hasn't been obtained before with a precision and a resolution, every step that's ever been taken in the history of science where you see something better today than you did yesterday, that's a discovery. There's going to be something going on you didn't know before. And that's always good. We always look forward to that. That's why we build build bigger telescopes and cameras of higher resolution and spectral windows that hadn't been opened before. All of this combined are part of the moving frontier. A frontier is not just how far did you go. It is what is your capacity to see wherever you happen to be on that frontier of exploration.
So this is very interesting. Perhaps ISRO worked this out and said, look, even if something were to happen with the lander, we will still be in the part of a moon that has not been explored in detail, and therefore there will still be takeaways.
Well, okay, I haven't seen the numbers for what the actual resolution of your cameras are, but if the cameras, depending on how large they are and what spectrum, what wavelength of light you're using, and what the goal set was for those cameras, there's no reason why all the science that was imagined for that orbiter wouldn't still continue. And so, yeah, we should all look forward to that. And I'm still happy India's on the moon.
Well, so we actually we're delighted. And when you put it that way, there's so much to take away from this particular achievement, even though we
Just
might have...
guarantee you did not miss the moon today.
We didn't miss the moon.
Didn't miss the moon.
What was this mission that you were talking about? The one that sort of forgot the reason why it took off from Earth?
Mars Global Surveyor. One of these. My specialty is galaxies, not planets. So otherwise, it would be very much in my head. Right. But that mission, it was just embarrassing because the engineers were using English units and the scientists were using metric units. And when they had to calculate what the craft needed to do with its energy supply when it got into the orbital space of Mars, the two numbers did not reconcile, and it just missed Mars entirely.
Okay, so yeah. Millions of Indians watching today, watching Neil Tyson. What's your message?
Oh, my message is, space is hard, and I will quote our President Kennedy from the 1960s when he said, we do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And when you do the hard things in life, it puts you in a place where you were not there before. And only when you do the hard things, when you take the hard, if I may address your student population, if you're awake at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, it is the weekend, however, there are people who want to get high grades and they take easy classes and then they get the high grade, but then what are you good for if everyone else took those same classes and got high grades? You take the harder classes. Maybe your grade is a little lower, but now you will ascend this pyramid of ability to solve problems. You'll ascend this ladder where you will see farther than others. And then when it's all is said and done, people will beat a path to your door. And if you do that as a nation, oh my gosh, lead us into the future. Take us to Mars.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, thank you very much. Those were really beautiful sentiments, and I'm sure Indians will hang on to every word you've said because you've really meant them earnestly. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to take a very short break. Thank you. Well, wonderful. Thank you very much. We're going to take a very short break, viewers, and we'll be back in just a few moments. Don't go away. This is still continuing.